Welcome to PowerCat Live. I'm here with Marty Carreras. Marty, you're the Global Cloud Expansion PM for Business Applications. What does that mean?
Hi, Phil. How you doing? Great to see you here. Yeah, it's a mouthful, right? Global Cloud Expansion PM for business applications is a handful, and I think we have to write that down to be able to say it consistently.
Got it here.
But in a nutshell, what that means is I run a team that works with all of our respective engineering teams across Business Applications Group as we work towards deploying our services in our global cloud footprint all across the world. As many of you know, Azure currently has a number of data centers all throughout the world. And as the geopolitical environment and other compliance requirements dictate the need for data to be at rest and even in transit within the country boundaries that a particular customer operates in, or a particular government has sovereignty and operates in. The Azure team has been continuing to build out these data centers all throughout the world. And as business applications, whether that be Dynamics 365 customer engagement apps or Dynamics finance or supply chain management, of course, the Power Platform itself, Power Apps, Power Automate, and then the underlying Dataverse capabilities. As they are essentially services that run on top of Azure, then we are naturally working towards deploying those services into those Azure regions as and when they become available. So my team is responsible for keeping tabs on the progression of Azure's footprint as it expands throughout the world, and helping to make sure that our teams are aligned in coordinating the deployment of our services into those Azure regions, so we ultimately can meet customers where they are to be able to help ensure their experience is what they expect.
Now, part of that, you mentioned like the sovereignty as part of this, these sovereign clouds. So part of this is understanding the different laws and regulations for all these different governments. Right. How does that manage? That must be really complicated, as there's so many sets.
Yeah, no kidding. And it's a really important point, Phil. I mean, there's two dimensions of this, right? There's our what we refer to as our general public or commercial cloud environment globally, and then we have our sovereign clouds. And so, as I get into to answering your direct question with respect to understanding different compliance regulations, I think it's important to kind of think, understand the breakdown of those two major categories. Our global footprint is when we refer to that, we're talking about, we have a customer that's operating in the United States, and there are 2 data centers that our services operate in. We have customers that are operating in Canada. There's data centers that the services that their subscription is running within operates in Canada. The same thing for United Kingdom. The same thing for recently France and Switzerland and Germany. That really represents our global cloud footprint. And what that really means is that it's a matter of making sure that the compute that they're using is the compute that's in that country, and the data at rest, most importantly, is at rest in that country. Why does that matter? Well, that matters because when it comes to any kind of laws and regulations that a given country has with respect to the way that data is handled, particularly in lawful type situations, it may differ from one jurisdiction to the next. So a customer that operates in a given country may feel more comfortable because they're familiar with what their requirements are from how their data would end up getting treated by Microsoft as a cloud solution provider for their implementations. That's our global footprint. And then we have the sovereign clouds, and the sovereign clouds effectively are like another geography or like another footprint of our services, but they bring with it an additional layer of compliance requirements that dictate a logical and physical separation of that data from the global cloud footprint implementations. So they are essentially, separate data centers or data centers with physical network isolation that enables those customers to achieve some of the compliance regulations that they operate in. And right now, we do that very specifically for the U.S. government. And there are a number of sovereign environments for our U.S. government to address different degrees of compliance framework, specifically around FedRAMP, as well as the Department of Defense has their compliance framework referred to as, or kind of driven by the organization referred to as DISA.
So it sounds complicated, but you're dealing with different international laws. You're dealing with
Right.
the Azure Foundation that all of these services run on.
Exactly.
And then what are the like within Power Platform and Dynamics, all of the business applications, like, how do you manage all of those deployments as well to these different clouds, right? Because you've got commercial in the US, but you've also got, sounds like, several US clouds for these different sovereign clouds, and then the ones around the world as well.
Yeah, exactly. So what ends up happening is that the compliance commitments, and in fact, if we flip over to the slides for just a minute, this is an illustration of all the compliance regulations. It's kind of an eye chart that our services are committed to. When we look at all of these different compliance regulations, you think, holy smokes, how do we ever get anything done if we're
I do wonder that.
Yeah, trying to align to all these different compliance commitments. And what happens is our Azure Global, we call them the Azure Global Compliance Team, does a phenomenal job assimilating all of the requirements down to a set of common expectations. So, there's a tremendous amount of overlap across these compliance regulations. And so what they do is they help to direct the team to what evidence and compliance commitments do we need to adhere to. And it encompasses all of these different compliance requirements. So then what happens is that as a SaaS service, we end up being able to take dependency and inherit the underlying compliance commitments that are being executed by the Azure services. Because just as a customer is an Azure customer, essentially business applications is an Azure customer, right? Probably one of the largest in the world. And so when a customer is deploying something into Azure and they need to prove to the regulators that they're in compliance because of the way that they're operating that application that's running in Azure, we do the same thing. We just do it on behalf of the customer, as a SaaS service. And so the way that we manage all of this is through a single compliance framework, much like we do for accessibility, actually. We don't just look at accessibility for Section 508. There's other accessibility standards. That's one of the many compliance commitments. We have a standard framework that we onboard into. And so as we onboard our services, we onboard them in a consistent way so that they're covered by these compliance commitments across the board. Now, when it comes to the sovereign environments, there's additional things that are beyond compliance. Things like ensuring that the service operators are have a certain degree of clearances. And that's why we end up having kind of isolated sovereign environments, because a lot of that has to do with not only network and physical isolation, but isolation of the physical human beings that are the operators of the service and the policies by which they're able to take action on those services.
That's interesting because there's a technical, there's legal, and there's also the human side.
Yeah, the human aspect. Yeah,
the overall compliance picture.
Right.
Now I know in the past too there have been differences in the types of services that are available in these different environments. Right. How is that managed, or how do you make sure that all of the functionality comes along for the ride?
Yeah, exactly. With this conversation, we spent a lot of time, speaking about the compliance element of things, and that actually is an aspect that kind of impacts the timing of when a given service goes general availability to when it's available into even some of our global footprints, but more often than not, it's an impact to our sovereign environments, because there are additional checks and balances of process that need to be adhered to in order for a new service to become available in the sovereign environments. And the thing is that in order for evidence to be gathered that we're operating the service in a certain way, it needs to be deployed, right? We can't get compliance before it's actually there. So it has to go, general availability in the public regions, and then there's a period of time by which the team is working towards deploying that into our sovereign regions, and then and as part of that, working through the compliance elements. Our strategic objective as an organization is within 90 days of general availability, being able to see that those same services reach the sovereign environments. That will give and take depending on details of the given service and the offering and the nuances. And that also is impacted by the fact that our engineering teams are very smart about using capabilities that are already in the environment to enable their capability. So think of yourself as a given program manager, right? And you have a product, you have an offering. You're not going to go repeat and recreate, something that's already, that's already being done, through another Azure service or through another service within Back. Right. You're going to take advantage of what another team has already done. Well, So as a team that's planning, okay, I've got this thing and I went live with it, they have to be mindful of whether or not their dependencies are currently available. Those dependencies sometimes have downstream dependencies that they need to work with, and work with their partner teams, within engineering teams, to make sure that they're on the same timeline. So all these timelines kind of intertwine and need to line up to ultimately result in value to the customer in terms of it being available in the sovereign environments most specifically.
So I've been on the side of building on top of these sovereign environments, and what you're describing is critical when you're doing that, right? Because you need to know what functionality is available now, especially if the app is going to require it. How do people stay up to date on that?
So if we take a look at the slide that's up there now, what you'll see is a number of different documentation sites. And through there, as an end user, as a partner, as a customer, you can get a sense of, what the commitments are, what the capabilities are, and more importantly, where we know that we've identified some things that haven't made it to the environments yet for U.S. government specifically. There is a tool, a Power BI powered tool called the Geographic Availability. And what you can do there is see, what is the footprint of our offerings across all of our global footprint of deployments. And all the little green dots are indicators of where there is availability. And then we also will project to the degree possible when we expect certain things to become available, down to either the half or the quarter of a calendar year, depending on the confidence and variables that are in play. But that's how you would end up kind of getting a sense of, what is where.
There's a lot of green on there, so that's a good sign.
Yeah.
So if people want to go learn more, what's coming up that they should know about?
Well, we have, coming up just in a not too distant future, in a few days, actually, we've got a huge event coming up on March 11th. We'll put the link in the video here. But that's going to be an opportunity for our leadership to be able to describe some of the recent very, very big news, which is the availability of our Dynamics 365 customer engagement apps. So sales, service, field service, project service automation, as well as Power Automate and Power Apps, available for our DoD customers with a compliance commitment aligned to this impact level 5. So that's huge. That was recently made available and announced in the January timeframe. There's going to be more discussions about that in the event coming up, as well as some information about finance and supply chain management. So stay tuned for that as well.
That's a good event. And we both worked with DoD customers. We know how important getting this into their hands is going to be. And
that's right.
And the fascinating use cases it's going to open up. That's terrific. Well, thanks, Marty. Any parting words?
No. I say no, but then I'll say yes. The last thing I'll say is thank you for those of you that out there that have been working in our U.S. government environments and working in our even actually not I say U.S. government, but also China and our implementation in that sovereign cloud. And we appreciate your patience as we work through bringing the capabilities to parity, as we call it, or feature symmetry, so that the user experience can be consistent across our commercial deployment, GCC, GCC High, DoD, China, and other sovereign clouds as they continue to evolve throughout the world.
And it sounds like there's some exciting things to come.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Phil.
Thanks, Marty. Great talking to you as always.
Likewise.